hadn't have guessed, heat embossing is one of my favourite medias to use in my cards, but often people see heat embossing as just a way to add some shine to your stamping. But why not use it in a way that adds another design element to your cards? Today's video, I'm focusing on spotlight embossing and how you can use heat embossing to add a spotlight focal element to your card, for which I have several different examples to show you, from a simple idea for beginners to a few more stepped up ideas for more advanced crafters. Hopefully you'll find one method that you like and that you want to use in your next project. I'm Verity and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, why not think about subscribing so you don't miss out on my next video. So the first technique is the easiest one to do, and this is block heat embossing to add a focal design element to your stamped background. For this card, I'm using the Whimsy Stamps Spiral Roses rubber background stamp, and to use this in my MISTI, I need to remove the foam pad part. To ensure the card is completely covered with the design, I need to place the card in the middle of the stamp. So I'm just applying some repositionable tape to the back of the card and then laying this on top of my stamp with the adhesive side facing upwards. Next, I'm closing the MISTI back to front, so that means closing the base of the top over the top of the stamp, and then I'm pressing down so the adhesive sticks to the base of the MISTI. Then I'm flipping it back over and opening it back up. So now my cardstock is adhered down in place, and if I need to restamp it a couple of times, I know my card is not going to move position. Okay, so I'm inking up the stamp with my clear ultra slow dry embossing ink and stamping this onto some Gina K Sweet Mango cardstock, and doing this twice to get a darker appearance, because I'm going to leave most of the stamp design in the embossing ink because it acts as a watermark ink and will give a tone on tone look. Okay, so next I'm using some Heavy Doodle Memo tape, but you can use any low tack tape that would work to mask off a strip of the card where you're going to add some heat embossing. So now I'm re-stamping this once more to ensure that the stamped area within that masked region is sticky, and covering this with some Wow Metallic Gold Rich Pale embossing powder. At this point, do not remove the tape before you've covered it with powder, as there's several different reasons. One, the ink from the main stamping may still be wet, so some of the powder could adhere to there, and the tape may leave some sticky residue that the powder could stick to as well, but we only want to add the heat embossing to that masked off area. I've heated the powder with my dual speed heat gun from Wow on the faster speed setting, and then as you remove the tape, you then have this lovely strip of heat embossing which acts as a spotlight area on the background of the design. This second technique uses the block heat embossing again to create a focal element, but on a heat embossed background design instead of a stamped background design. So this card uses the Pinstripe background from Altenew and is stamped onto a piece of Solar White Classic Crest 80-pound cardstock with a strip of card masked off, again using some masking tape. For this background, I'm then covering the design with white pearl embossing powder. And this is becoming a new favourite of mine for sort of tone on tone stamping for subtle backgrounds, because when it's heat set, it gives such a lovely subtle shine and texture to a background without detracting from the focal elements of the card. Okay, so I'm next placing the card back into my MISTI and masking off either side of the strip where we had not got any heat embossing, and re-stamping the background again in some slow drying ink. And this time I'm using coloured embossing powder to create a contrast against that subtle tone on tone heat embossed background to create the spotlight effect. So the powder I'm using here is the Aztec Glints powder, and this is stunning. It's a lovely pearlescent burnt orange, and it pairs so well with the pearl powders because it has that pearlescent shine when it's heat set. And then when you see this background together, you've got all that pearlescence, but that coloured embossing strip just adds that spotlight effect. For the third technique, we are going to use spotlight embossing on a die cut. So I've die cut the word thanks from the Altenew Script Words 2 die set from white cardstock, and I'm placing it back into my MISTI and positioning the die cuts back into the negative space. the best way I find to keep them in place, including the inners of the letters, is to cover the negative space on the back of the card with washi tape. So this then makes your negative die cut area sticky. And then you can place the pieces back in and it holds it all in place whilst you're stamping. So I'm using the tropical stamp from Wow and inking this up with slow drying ink. And the washi tape then allows you to remove the die cut word from the background and only cover that area with powder. So for this card I'm using the Aladdin embossing glitter, which is an orange mix with some gold glitter in it. And if you need to re-stamp and cover once more with powder to get more intensity with your heat embossing, it's easy enough to do because you're going to adhere your word back down into that makeshift sticky area within that die cut window. To finish the background on this card, I'm then stamping the remainder of the card with the tropical stamp in a selection of Catherine Pooler inks. Okay, so I'm using Limoncello to start and inking up the top end of the stamp. And then I'm moving down the stamp and inking this up with Tiara, then Tiki Torch, and lastly Orange Twist to create an ombre look. Now as I'm inking the stamp up, I'm overlapping the colour slightly to try and blend the colours. And then once you've stamped, you get a lovely bright ombre background. The fourth technique uses heat embossing to create negative spaces on your card. So I've die cut a heart from Inkadinkado masking paper and positioned this over to one side of a white card panel. Next, I've placed this in my MISTI and I'm stamping this script background from Honeydew Crafts in embossing ink. And the embossing powder I'm going to use for this card is Pop, which comes from the Confetti Trio. Now, this has some large chunks of powder in it. And this background is quite a thin, delicate, stamped design, so the large chunks won't adhere to it that much. However, for this design, I only wanted speckles of the larger chunks to appear, which did happen when it was heat set. So for me, this worked really, really well. This powder is an orange-based powder with chunks of white and silver that melt and blend with one another. Okay, so I'm removing the mask, and then you have this negative shape of the heart providing a focal point for the card, and it is the heat embossing that creates that spotlight. The last technique of spotlight embossing is a dip dyed heat embossing look. So for the second background we created, I wanted to add a die cut sentiment, and I die cut the Altenew Fancy Hello die from Sweet Mango card stock several times and laid it up for dimension. But to add that spotlight embossing, I'm then taking my embossing pad directly to the die cut, smooshing it down over one half of the die cut, and then covering it with metallic gold rich pale powder. As you heat set this, it gives the illusion that you've dipped or dyed the bottom of your word in gold, and I think it looks gorgeous. Now, I've repeated this twice just to get a more smoother finish, but it's personal preference on the number of times you want to smoosh it down and add powder and heat set. Okay, so this was adhered to the background, which was foam mounted onto a white card base, and I've added a sentiment from the Altenew sentiment strip stamp set, which was heat embossed in matching gold powder onto a black strip. And to make sure I've adhered it straight, I'm just using my T-ruler to line it up. For the first background, I've kept it nice and simple to allow that spotlight embossing strip just to shine. I've used the Happy die from the Altenew Script Words 2 set in white card and added a heat embossed anniversary sentiment to the card. For the third background, this was matted onto a white base layer, but I wanted the sentiment die cut to pop out even more from that busy background. So using the same colours that I used to stamp the background, I'm ink blending these onto the die cut for a bold ombre look to contrast against that background. This really helps to bring out that spotlight embossing on the die cut. The whole panel was adhered onto a Sweet Mango card base, and the die cut had been layered up for more dimension. Again, a gold heat embossed sentiment of You're Amazing was added to the front of the card with Gina K Connect glue to keep it in place. For the last background, I added another heat embossed dip dyed sentiment from the Scripts Words 2 set in Sweet Mango card, and added this to the background, which had been foam mounted onto a white card base. Again, I added a gold heat embossed sentiment just to finish the card off. Then all 4 cards were then finished off, just adding a few white tonic nouveau drops here and there. There are so many ways you can use heat embossing to step up your design elements within your papercraft projects, creating this spotlight effect. So why not give it a try when you're next in the craft room? Don't forget to head to the Wow Embossing Powder Fans Facebook group to see more inspiration and to check out our monthly challenge where there is a £15 or $15 gift card up for grabs. This was produced as part of my design team work for Wow Embossing Powder, and links are listed below. I'm sent some goodies as part of my work, but I truly do love using Wow Embossing Powders. A 10% discount at the shop, enter the code on screen. If you're not a subscriber already, why not click that button below along with that bell icon to be notified when my next video is up. Please remember to hit that thumbs up button and share this video with your crafty friends. And why not check out this other video for some more inspiration. Until next time, happy crafting!